So we've been looking a couple weeks at this question, do you have a plan? It's the beginning of the year. There's different things that provoke us to step back and take inventory and consider such questions. One of those things is the turn of a calendar year, and we look at a new year, and so that's one marker. Another one is when things just aren't going so well. They seem to be blowing up in our face, and it causes us to stop and hit the pause button and review things. And so here we are, beginning of 26, and as I was looking at Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, chapter 13, I saw, if you have our Bibles from off the shelf, it's page 818. If you want to turn there. So, but I thought I saw something really fascinating and interesting here. So here's a moment in time when it says in chapter 13, verse 1, that same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. That really caught my eye because since I've been 18 years old, every year, end of the year, the last week of the year, I spend time just reflecting on the year, on the coming year. And I've been doing that since I was 18 years old. And just go some corner of the house or out of the house. And I have memories of being at Salt Fork and going to grab a cup of coffee and just stare out the window and reflect before the Lord of what's going on. And so this verse caught me because here Jesus, he goes out of the house and he sat beside the sea. But you have to know what's going on that he does this. Things have kind of come unraveled. He has had a dynamic beginning of his ministry, all right? And with his ministry, he's been healing people. He's been calling people to be his disciples. He sent out the 12, 2 by 2, into places to do what he'd been doing. They'd been watching, they'd been walking with him. And he says, go into each town, don't take anything with you. This is just a chapter or so before this. And he says, you go out, you heal the sick, you preach the good news. You've been watching me, now you go. This has been a great thing that's going on. But, well, the people who aren't so enthralled with his teaching because they're threatened by it, they're getting more and more upset. And the more they get upset, they're thinking about what can we do here? To stop this, to shut this guy down, to shut him up. And so one of the things they do in chapter 12, it's kind of what you see happening all through history. Whenever somebody is making a powerful impact and is threatening to people, they either discredit them or kill them. This is Martin Luther King Jr. Weekend. Monday, we remember the influence that he had. And so many people, the memory is of a civil rights activist. But his message was one of love. The whole core message to everything that he did in that movement was that love overcomes hate. Hate does not rid the world of hate. That was the core message, and it was based on Jesus' teachings. They've, over the many, many years, people have tried to discredit that message, discredit him. They killed him. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, but with Jesus, and Martin Luther King had a powerful message, but it was Jesus' message. And with Jesus, he was the author of it. And here Jesus is, he's doing nothing but healing the sick, sharing good news to the poor and the oppressed, setting captives free. And you know what they tell him? You can look and study at chapter 12. We're not going to get into this, but it tells what it's about. His opponents, they start saying, you're out of your mind. You're crazy. In fact, you're demon possessed. And so he teaches about the demonic, and he teaches how foolish it is to suggest that he's of the demonic. And he responds. He doesn't react to him. He responds to it. And while he's still speaking to him, they say, your mother and your brothers are outside, and they want to talk to you. They want to speak with you. Jesus says, who's my mother, my brothers? They're the people who do the will of God. Do the will of my Father in heaven. That's my brother, sister, and mother. That same day. That's where it takes us to 13:1. These chapter separations we put in years later. But what Matthew wrote was, there was no chapter separation. When he says, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my mother, sister, and brother. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea. He is in a place of withdrawing and taking inventory. You know what you do when you take inventory? You consider, what do I got to work with? Where are we at here? He's got to pull aside, and he's thinking about that. And these crowds of people, he's just sitting by the sea having a moment, and the crowds of people gather. They're not going to give him that moment because the message has been so powerful. And they gather about him, and the pressure is so great that he gets in a boat just so he can be a little bit of distance and speak with them, and he begins to teach them. So when we ask, do you have a plan? I just want to look at Jesus and see where he's at. He had a plan, and he was given that plan by the Father. And chapter 13 talks about it in many different ways. And we're going to look at that today and in the coming weeks. We're just going to get a start into it today. But it's out of this moment that his teaching develops. And you begin to see Jesus' mission. He starts speaking about it in a parable. And one of the first things he has to say, like I said, is what does he have to work with? We're going to read the parable here, and we're just going to talk about it for a few minutes. So he got into the boat, sat down, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, and here's the first parable. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, planting seeds, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. So Jesus teaches this parable, and the disciples, they come to him, and they say, why do you speak in parables? Please appreciate their question. Why would you ask such a question? You would ask that question if you didn't need the parable. Or if you just wanting to be direct. Why don't you just be more direct? One of the two. They say, why do you speak in parables? And Jesus tells them something that's an incredible affirmation to them. This is not Sometimes he has things to say that are words of correction. He's giving them a huge pat on the back here. He says, to you, it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. But to them, it has not been given. So he's talking about the crowds he just spoke to. Disciples are there saying, well, why are you speaking in parables? Why are you speaking in these word pictures about the sowing, the seeds, the birds? And he says, you guys understand the secrets. They don't get it. For to one who has more will be given, and he'll have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, and the prophet Isaiah said this 700-800 years before. He's telling the chosen people, you will indeed hear, and Jesus quotes this, you'll indeed hear, but you'll never understand. And you'll indeed see, but never perceive, for this people's heart has grown dull. And with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they've been closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, and I would heal them. And Jesus goes on to say, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of God, word of the kingdom, and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what's been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. So the seed sown along the path, remember, paths are hard, pounded dirt. People passed over it, so the seed can't, it just sits on top. And he says, the evil one comes and snatches it away. In the parable we read, back in verse 4, it's represented by the birds. And he said, as for what's sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when there's a little problem, when there's tribulation or persecution that comes because of being a believer, because of the word, he immediately falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world, deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what is sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. So here Jesus is. He's told he's demonic. He's told that they're trying to discredit him. He pulls away and reflects, and he's thinking about, he's taking inventory and stock and what his mission, what he's got to work with, what his mission is. And so he starts sharing when the crowds come. He's telling them in parables. And his disciples say, why parables? And he says, you guys get it. You understand. Now understand something. Later he's going to have different moments where they have weak moments. They're not comprehending everything. But they're in a good place with Jesus. They've listened to these words. Their lives are never going to be the same again. It has really already changed their lives. They're already beginning to pick up what he's doing. He went out 2 by 2 and we're doing the same things. And he's telling them, you're blessed. You're in a good place. You're the good soil. I just want you to stop and think about the bad ground. Really, what's at the core of what makes bad soil? When you look at this whole passage, what Jesus is saying, there's a lot of things I could say to make everybody in the room feel like they're bad soil. Not my goal this morning. I don't think it was Jesus' goal. But I just want you to think about what he talks about here that makes for bad soil. Where does it start? Verse 15, what Isaiah said. For this people's heart has grown dull. It's have you ever had something happen like your limbs fall asleep, your arm falls asleep, your feet fall asleep, and you really can't, you don't have full feeling of your toes. I deal with that on an ongoing basis because of my back problems, so my feet always feel like they're half asleep. It's not fun. You just can't wait until you can get the arm, you shake it out. You want that sensation back, right? This is about a heart that is like that. The sensitivity of the heart, it's dull. It's kind of like something that went to sleep. And so their hearts are dull. And so when it comes to listening to something from God, he uses the illustration of eyes and ears. They can barely hear, and their eyes, they can't even see. They're blind. But he's talking about the heart and the condition of the heart that would, and Isaiah says, and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. So the bad ground, regardless of whether it's because it's the path, whatever, for whatever reason, whether it's rocky soil, whether it's in the thorns and the thistles, the bottom line is the common denominator with all those is the heart. Is the heart fallen asleep? Or worse, hardened so that it'll never wake up? Is it the heart? The heart's the problem. That's what determines. It's not what makes for good soil is not how much money somebody has. It's not how good they sing. It's not what kind of impression they can put on when people gather for church. It's not how did they get to church 90% of the time last year. That's not. None of those have anything to do with condition of the heart. No, the question is, has the heart grown cold and dull? In other words, when God's speaking, what are people hearing? Anything? Because these people weren't hearing anything. When there's words of the kingdom that are shared, what's happening? Is anything in life changing? Because with good soil, there's fruit. There's something that actually happens with the seeds that are planted. So when Jesus had these disciples that make all kind of mistakes, but they're there, they're receiving the words, they're accepting the teachings, the seeds are growing, and when he says go out 2 by 2, they do it. And when they sent them out by the 72, 2 by 2, to do the same thing, you read about it in Luke, they come back rejoicing that even the demons fell before them. These are people that actually listened to what he had to say, so that when he's saying here are my mother and brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father, chapter 12, verse 50, whoever does the will of my Father in heaven's my brother and sister and mother. He's not talking about a new legalism. He's talking about somebody who has a heart to hear and listen and then do because they were listening to what God had to say. Interesting. Agora had just started, and that was 30 some years ago. I had a lot to learn, still do. But I remember we have to be kind of careful in the circles that we were in fellowship with in the church, because somebody said they heard from God. They kind of wondered if you were crazy. You're hearing voices. You okay? Wow. Where are we at? That was the question here. The question was, do you have a heart that's actually receiving and hearing the word of the kingdom? Or is your knee-jerk reaction, that's kind of crazy? That would be one of these three soils. Is it somebody that's jumping up and down and excited. They hear something and they're all excited. One little problem comes and I think I'll listen to that guy. That was kind of crazy. The disciples were people who they weren't chasing after crazy. They were running away from crazy. Crazy is not listening to God. Crazy is hearing from God, watching. Just a chapter before, John the Baptist sends his disciples, to ask Jesus' disciples and ask Jesus, are you really the one? Do you know what Jesus' response was? Why don't you go back and tell him the blind see, the deaf hear, and the mute speak. People who couldn't walk are walking. Look at what God's doing here. Make up your own mind. Now I'm putting that in my words. But look at what's happening. Not crazy. Crazy is when you see God's hand at work and you're not receiving it and you're not growing. There's no fruit. That's crazy. And he tells his disciples, you are blessed. And you have a fruit-bearing future. He tells them, he says, you're the good soil. And he had just told them in the parable, I kind of wonder, I would have loved to wind the tape back and replay a conversation that happened when 2 of them walked off here and 4 of them walked off there. Just to listen to what they said. Guys, he just told us we're the good soil. He says, we're going to be fruitful. We got a great future ahead. That's what Jesus is telling them there. There are seeds that fall on good soil, produce grain, 100-fold, some of them 60, some 30. When seeds fall on good soil, there's fruit. He doesn't say you got a shot at it. And he doesn't say it's for this kind of person who's special or that kind of person. No. He says if it falls on good soil, that's what's going to happen. And the good soil has to do with where the heart is. Is it a heart that wants to hear, wants to receive, wants to grow? Every disciple, except Judas, were totally invested. It cost them severely. Every one of them, they believe, was martyred except John, who was ostracized and put on an island to spend many, many years shunned, living by himself. And so many people think, wow, look at what it cost them. I want you to consider some second-generation disciples, after Jesus died on the cross. You read in Acts chapter 16, you know what you find there? You find a story about a businesswoman. This is a very successful businesswoman who's in the town of Philippi. I think it's Philippi. I might be wrong about that. Because just shortly after that, there's a story about the Philippian jailer. I think it's Thyatira, actually. But the lady's name was Lydia. She was a dealer in purple. Purple was really expensive fabrics. And so here this businesswoman is. She gets saved, and she doesn't stop because her life is so changed at this point. She tells Paul, she tells the other believers, you got to stay at my house. Come while you're in town and stay here. And the church no doubt gathered in her home. This lady's life would never be the same again. There's another one. Have you ever read the little letter of Philemon? Paul's writing to Philemon. Philemon wasn't this broke person. He was a very successful person, successful enough that he had slaves. And Paul's writing to him in asking him to have mercy on Onesimus, who ran away from him. Onesimus was his slave. And he's saying, basically what Paul's saying in very delicate terms, you have your very life that you owe me because you got saved. And he says, so now I'm asking you, give Onesimus here a break because he's serving the Lord and he's been serving the Lord with me. So I'm sending him back to you, but don't accost him, bless him. Philemon was not a broke person. Barnabas, Acts 4. You know what Barnabas, one of his first experiences in the kingdom, he was a landowner. He had property. He was not a poor person. He sold his land and gave it to those in need. Luke, who wrote the book of Acts, and he wrote the Gospel of Luke, he was a doctor. These people were totally invested in the kingdom because they were good soil. They were people who wanted to hear, who wanted to receive. When Jesus put the seeds out, when the seeds were planted by others that were called to do this, they received it and their lives were never the same. Good soil hears and receives the seed. It doesn't reject it. And it wasn't about what they lost. It was about what they gained. That's why they did that. They gained fruit. They didn't see sacrifice. They sacrificed, but it wasn't about that. It was about all they received. Because good soil is productive. They saw the fruit, and they celebrated that, and they embraced it. When we step back right now, us here, and I look at this, and I think, so here we are. We've been working away here since 1995 here at Agora. Productive. Some people would question that. But I see people who receive the seed and grow. I don't see perfect people. None of us are perfect. But I see people whose hearts are to hear and to receive and to grow. God's mission is for us to be people who would see what he's doing, understand it, receive that, grow in it, and be productive. The productive piece, what he wants to do, what he wants to accomplish. What was the productive piece for the disciples? You know what? Peter, James, and John, Andrew, they didn't go back to selling fish and catching fish. Jesus said he was going to teach them how to be fishers of men. The Apostle Paul, he had a thriving business and paid for his ministry by working at his business. God has a path for each person. He has purposes for each. The question is, when he accomplishes it because the heart receives and doesn't reject. What do you do when you hear words of the kingdom? Is your heart to say, wow, I want to be productive. I want to hear what God has to say. I want to see fruitfulness in my life. Is that what the heart is? Or is our knee-jerk reaction in some way to be threatened by it and push back? I'm not talking about looking at things and examining them. I'm talking about the pushback that's rejection. Good soil receives the seed. Good soil allows the roots to grow and the fruit to flourish. God has abounding fruitfulness. And so when Jesus here, he goes and sits by the sea, and he starts into chapter 13. All of chapter 13 is what the kingdom is like. while God's purposes were eventually to see the church happen and flourish, it was the kind of, all the word church means in the New Testament's assembly. What he wanted to see was people assembling and gathering together around the purpose of his mission. And so when we here look all over again at that, I want to tell you, I really believe Jesus has us to hear him saying, "You're good soil." I really do. He watches and he sees the heart and he sees the fruitfulness. You're good soil. But he has so many more things to tell us about what the kingdom of heaven is, kingdom of God, what it's like. And we're going to look at that in the coming weeks because I think it's eye-opening. So what is that as we understand chapter 13? So what does it mean for us with what we're doing here? What does it mean for the gathering of people? It doesn't matter where, but because we're here, we're going to be looking at it for those of us here. It doesn't matter where you're at. What does it mean to be that gathering together of God's people? That he has a mission for you. He has fruitfulness for you. What does that look like? He has some really insightful things to share in Matthew 13. But he starts off, and I want to start off this way, by telling his disciples, you are the good soil. And he continues. Does that mean he doesn't teach to everybody? Oh no, he even taught to those who rejected him. He scattered the seed everywhere because he never stopped reaching out to people. But he wanted his disciples to know they're good soil. They're following. They're listening. Because their hearts were in a different place than many people's hearts are. All you have to do is turn your heart, and he heals. And some of us, that turns kind of slow. And the faster we turn, the more we turn, the more he works fruitfulness. He doesn't have bad things in mind. We can go from 30-fold to 100-fold. It's really up to us and the turn of our heart. Do we want to receive the word of his kingdom? The word of his kingdom is a seed. Father, I want to thank you for the morning. I want to thank you for this passage here in Matthew. It's awesome to me to see Jesus, one who would pull aside and reflect. Not be dismayed at all, just reflect on what the mission was and what he had to work with and how he walked forward. God, that we would see this and we'd walk in it, in the authority that you have. We're your seed, you watering, we grow, and the fruitfulness comes because our hearts are turned fully unto you. So, Lord, I just pray that you would work such in each of our lives that our hearts are just turned completely and totally to you. Just watching the amazing things that you want to do. And Lord, while we put that before you, we also know the enemy is like that bird he's just hovering about, watching the seeds he can snatch. God, I just pray that you would guard your good soil and that you would see that seed deposited, that it would sprout, that it would grow, and it would flourish. So we look for your blessing, your favor and grace. Thank you for your loving kindness. In your name I pray, amen.